Okay, equivalent fractions are always equal in size. They're just written slightly differently. Okay, so I want you to have a look at these models that I have given you here. Okay, this first model is split into 4 pieces, quarters. So the denominator is going to be 4. One of those pieces is shaded, so it is 1/4 shaded. This here, you can see that these two shaded parts are exactly the same size, except it's just cut into more pieces. So if you, like we always say, imagine a cake. So it's exactly the same size cake, except these pieces are bigger because it's cut into quarters. And this one is cut into 16 pieces. So my denominator is 16, but 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the 16 are shaded. They are still equal. They are still equal pieces. They're exactly the same size, just written differently. Now, another way to work it out, instead of using the visuals, is to use your knowledge of times tables and multiples. So if you look at 4, what do we times 4 by to get to 16? 4 times what is 16? 4 times 4 is 16, and whatever we do to the denominator, we must do to the numerator, and vice versa. So let's check and see. So if I times that by 4, 1 times 4 is 4, okay? So that's how we work out equivalent fractions, but let's just look at a few more examples so that you've got it right in your head. So let's stick with the quarters. So let's pretend we have 3/4 and we get a question that wants us to turn it into 16ths again. I already know from my first question and my knowledge of times tables that 4 times 4 is 16. So I must do the same to the numerator. 3 times 4 is 12. And if I were to use my visual up here, I would see that if I coloured in 3 of the quarters, okay, so all of those, 1, 2, 3 quarters, and if I colour in the same amount on here, I would still get my 12/16ths, okay? Next one, let's look at fifths. And imagine I got a question that wants to turn fifths into 20ths. They're equivalent fractions. They're going to be exactly the same size, just the numbers are going to be a little bit different. So here we go again. Think about your multiples. Think about your multiplication tables. 5 times what gets me 20? 5 times 4, I get 20. Just happens to be a 4 again. And I must do the same to the top. 2 times 4, well, that is 8. So 2/5 is equal to, is the same as 8/20ths. Let's look at another one before we move on. So imagine I have 2/7. So I have a cake or a diagram split into 7ths, but this time they've only given me the numerator. I haven't got my denominator. You do exactly the same thing, except you start at the top with the numerator. 2 times what equals 6? 2 times 3 equals 6. And remember, we must repeat the same multiplication with the denominator. 7 times 3 is 21. 2/7 equals 6/21. They are all equivalent fractions, and that's how you work them out. Okay, and then last week you had a question, you had a Venn diagram that looked like this, okay? And when I was getting some emails in, I did spot a few errors. So let's have a quick look at this first. So it said, sort the fractions into the groups. So these fractions here, if they were equivalent to 1/4, you put them in there. If they were equivalent to 1/3, you put them in there. You need to look at the denominators, because equivalent fractions, the denominators are always going to be multiples and factors of each other. So I'm going to have 1/3 here, and then I'm going to write 1/4. Let's have a look. So 5/15, okay. if I counted in quarters or in fours, would I ever get to 15? So I have 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, okay? 15 is not a multiple of 4, so I know it's not going to be equivalent to a quarter. However, if I count in my multiples of 3 or my 3 times table, I have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, etc, etc, etc. Well, look what I have here, 15. So let's have a look at 5/15ths. Let's just double check that they are equivalent fractions. So 3 times what gets me to 15? 3 times 5, have to do the same to the top. 1 times 5 is 5. So 5/15ths is equal, oops, wrong box. 5/15ths is equal to 1/3, okay? Let's have a look at 2/6. Okay, again, let's look at that 6. Look at your multiples. So when I'm going up in 4s, do I ever get to 6? No, I don't, okay? When I'm counting in 3s, yes, I do. But I'm going to double check my work. So 1/3 is equivalent to 2/6. Let's check. So 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. So yes, 2/6 is also equal to 1/3. This is when it starts to get tricky, when we have things like 3/12ths, okay? Because 12 is common in both of these. 12 is common in both of these, so we need to be really careful about this. So let's have a look at 3/12ths, okay? So 1/4, let's look at the 12th. So 4 times 3 is 12, so I must do the same to the top, the numerator. 1 times 3 is 3, so 1/4 is equal to 3/12ths. It's equivalent, okay? I could test it out with my thirds just to double check to see. 1/3 equals 3/12ths. Well, let's have a look. 3 up to 12, we have to times it by 4. 1 times 4, it is not 3. That is not going to work. So I'm going to stick with my 3/12ths, okay? The same with the numbers 24, because 24 are both multiples of 3 and 4, so you need to be careful with those, okay? But 20 is easy to work out because it's in the 4 times tables, okay? 5/20ths. When I have a quarter, okay, so let me just write it up here. 1/4 equals 5/20ths. 4 times 5 is 20. 1 times 5 is 5. So 5/20ths will go over there. So when you're looking at the 24ths, you're going to have to be really careful and work on your times tables with that. Okay, but I just wanted to speak to you about this well, it's not a Venn diagram, but it's kind of like a sorting diagram, because some people I noticed had a few tiny little mistakes, not big ones, but just to double check and to have a look at the answer sheet as well that I attach. And then last but not least, here in the first 2 sheets that I've been working with, we've been multiplying to find the equivalent fractions. But it can also work with division. So if you look at these here, hopefully you can see this okay. Okay, so we can work with division. So here I have 4/12ths and I need to get down to thirds. So instead of multiplying to make numbers bigger, I'm going to divide. So 12 divided by what gets me to 3? 12 divided by 4 equals 3, and I must divide by 4 at the top. Whatever I do to the denominator, I must do to the numerator. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 4/12ths equals 1/3. Okay, let's have a look at this one. 12 to 4, 12 divided by 3 equals 4, and I must do the same to the top. 6 divided by 3 equals 2. Okay, and this is called simplifying fractions as well. Simplifying is when you divide. Here we have 12 down to 2. 12 divided by, can you guess? 6 equals 2. So therefore 6 divided by 6 equals 1. So 6/12 equals 1/2. So you can do the same using division. Okay, I hope that's made it a little bit clearer for you guys. Okay, so you need your knowledge of multiples and times tables to find your equivalent fractions. And just remember, whatever you do to the top has to happen to the bottom, the numerator, the denominator, or the other way around. So I hope that was a good refresh.